Hello everyone, welcome to Snap or Pass. My name's MJ, and this is a series where we look at the new cards coming to Marvel Snap each week. This week we've got a bonus card because High Voltage is running, and you'll be able to get Lasher. He's a 2/2, activate, afflict an enemy card here with negative power equal to this card's power. We're going to be looking at the mechanics around Lasher. I'll give you several deck ideas, and ultimately we'll be saying, is it a snap or pass? You can use the chapters below to skip to the section you want to see. Let's crack on with it, guys. So High Voltage is back. I think we all had a lot of fun, generally speaking. Last time High Voltage, we're up in the Hoy lands now. Last time High Voltage was around. This time it's around from December the 28th until January the 4th. And then at which point you'll also be able to buy it in the token store for 3,000 tokens, because this is a Series 4 release. The highest, I think actually Lasher is the highest reward this time round, and the second highest reward is this variant for Spider-Man 2099. I think this variant for Spider-Man 29 is sick. I think the card is pretty weak, sort of Spider-Man 2099, and don't actually know what either of these cards have to do with Marvel Rivals, seeing as this is still a Marvel Rivals season, so that's a bit curious. But anyway, let's talk about the mechanics around Lasher. So I think the archetypes that he's going to fit into most comfortably would include, of course, affliction decks, maybe set power decks, giving him a little buff, high evolutionary decks, because those already want to afflict the enemy cards, clog, because you're forcing them to have stuff and then you're debuffing the stuff, and buffs, because Lasher is in this interesting position of benefiting from both buffing him and he's contributing towards affliction on your opponent's side. So I think he's pretty cool, but we'll discuss him in more detail right now. So any buff he receives will be worth double, because of course you gain the buff and then you can afflict that buff onto an enemy card. So is he like a mini Black Panther? You're kind of doubling up the power? Like, very sort of. His ability being an activate gives you additional control over priority, so you can control that power a little bit, and when you feel that you need to swing priority, you can then maybe activate Lasher and get that negative affliction, or the base affliction. Negative affliction would technically better be a buff. And his equivalent base stats is 2/4. Like, if you just don't do anything to him and you manage to get off the activate, he's a 2/4. So he's generally good, but there is a normal sort of caveat with that, is that if you draw him on turn 6 or the final turn of the game, if there's limbo, whatever, or TVA, then you're not going to be able to utilize that activate power. So the pros around him, you can prepare a larger affliction earlier in the game with late game payoff. What I mean to say is you can get him on the board down early, and then there's loads of cards that buff him. Even things like Blue Marvel and, you know, non-permanent buffs should actually work with him. So there'll be some considerations for locations, which we'll look at in a second as well. But even just things like Namora, Ironheart, these are cards that can buff Lasher after you've played him. There may be an element of control to this card. Your opponent may not play a card at Lasher's location, or they may hold off, especially if they've got something like an Iron Man there. Is a fairly daunting Lasher. Even if you haven't buffed it yet, there's that threat that you might buff him. Is that enough for them to stave off playing something like an Iron Man at their location? Very interesting to consider. And you can benefit well from hand buffs and board buffs. Pretty much as I just said, there is lots of ways to increase the power of cards in Marvel Snap. And there's plenty of hand ones, of course, as well. But even thinking about the Season Pass card, Galacta, that is basically the equivalent of Lasher being a 2/10, essentially. Now, of course, you do need to have not played that on the final turn. So that sort of pretty much limits you to doing that on turn 5. But that might still be a great play, especially if you consider a deck that I've been playing. Sinister, Mr. Sinister, feels hideously underplayed with Galacta. Like, I know everyone's saying about Brood. Obviously, the Brood combo is absolutely crazy, but it does take up 3 spaces. Mr. Sinister, just with Galacta and nothing else, is a 210. So I have seen this month how insanely powerful that can be, and how unpredictable it is as well. Of course, Lasher is inherently more predictable because they're going to know what you're going to do, but still, that is a -5 threat that they would have to consider on their side. However, he's not all meadow honey sheds. If you saw the last episode, I'm not going to go down that route again though. It's too early. I'm filming this very early today. Cons: your opponent might not play a card here at all, so you can miss out on the affliction. Now, of course, if they're not playing there at all, maybe you just win the location, but maybe they've got other shenanigans to get a card in there. Maybe it could be a green goblin, a hobgoblin, a claw. There's other ways to win locations without actually playing a card on their side. I mean, I know Green Goblin and Hobgoblin would be played on their side, but they end up on yours. With a relatively low base power, it's I don't know why I said it's, actually, he's susceptible to Red Guardian. This is probably going to be one of the biggest things for him. Again, as we've said, he's an activate, so you need to get him down before you can do anything with him, and that makes him very ripe for Red Guardian. So generally speaking, I like to recommend Spider Pig as insurance against Red Guardian. So maybe run your Spider Pig and then into your Lasher. And you can't utilise the activate ability if drawn on the final turn. It's the same with all activates, guys. It's a very powerful effect, but not on the final turn if you draw it. Let's talk about the location. So there's actually quite a number of good ones, but there's quite a number of bad ones as well. I think, nary have we discussed such a quantity of locations, good or bad, for this character and card. I sound like Santa Claus. I know, and it is a few days before Christmas. You could well be watching this on Christmas, and if you are, happy Christmas. I hope you're eating merrily and tide of joy. Anyway, good locations include Kiln, because you're going to be able to get the card in there early and benefit from it later, especially if you are playing cards that buff Lasher after you've played Lasher. So Ironheart, Namora, etc. I mean, Lasher into Kiln and then Namora-ing could be a big enough swing just to win it anyway, so that's interesting to consider. Muir Island is a really good one. Love that. Growing in power each turn, and then you can do what? If you play it on curve, 2, it's going to be like a 7? A 2/7, and then you'll be able to afflict 7 minus power to their side, which basically negates one of their buffs if they got a card in that early as well, so that's pretty interesting. Destroyed Manor is an interesting one because they are guaranteed going to have a card at that location. Wakandan Embassy, of course, we've already said Lasher is maybe sort of like a mini Black Panther, and that's going to be beneficial. The Nexus is really interesting as well, especially if you've got a nice, big, beefy, juicy Lasher. I mean, my maths is bad, guys, but is that a quadruple? Is that a quadruple hit? I can't do the maths. It's obviously double, because you get the buff and then you afflict, but that power is spreading everywhere. So, like, are you almost like triplicating the affliction and the buff? Is it like a ×6? I don't know. Yggdrasil. It's another buff location, guys, so Lasher's going to benefit from that. And Shuri's Lab, if you have a way, if you're playing like a hand buff version of Lasher. By the way, I'm talking about buffs a lot. It's just because generally I think that's where Lasher is going to, you're going to be able to take most advantage of him if you are actually buffing him up. Anyway, if you've already got a nice juiced up Lasher, right, maybe Fastos got a little lick on, maybe Nakia, and then you're able to get like the Galacta down. Poof, goes absolutely nuts in Shuri's Lab, man. Now, bad locations. There are bad ones. Thunderbolt's Tower. It's bad because they'll probably avoid playing in there the entire game, so they won't have anything in there. Thunderbolt's Tower triggers after turn 5, and you can't really play Lasher on 6 because then you won't be able to activate him. And if you do play him down before 5, he's going to lose the 2 power. So, I mean, if he's bigger than that, and you're able to get stuff down, and you don't have priority, then maybe. But otherwise, I'm not sure about it. Monster Island. You might be thinking, why is Monster Island bad? They've actually got a card there. Well, if you're afflicting the monster with -2 power, at least, excuse me. I don't know why I'm burping. I haven't eaten today. Maybe it's like a hunger burp. Are those a thing? You know, yeah, the monster's going to have lower power. And yeah, actually, that might be alright, but it does actually block you off from doing Shang-Chi as well. So, Dark Dimension, every activate card's worst nightmare. You just can't even do it. And Negative Zone is an interesting one. If your Lasher is not buffed and you play Lasher into Negative Zone, he'll be a -1. And the way that his text reads is what? It's like deal opposite. It's like equal negative affliction. So if it's a -1, negativing that would be a +1. So I'm pretty sure you would buff your opponent's card. So yeah, don't play it into Negative Zone. Of course, on the flip side, if your Lasher is buffed, maybe let's say a 6, so it's a 3, you can give the -3 to your opponent's card, which is already -3. So could be interesting. Anyway, there are several counters, guys. So first and foremost, because Lasher is buffed himself, typically, like we said, and afflicts a card at the same location, it means that Shadow King is a double counter. It counters both sides of it. So that's very interesting. Maybe you almost want to play Penny Parker with Lasher. So you can play Penny Parker on there, then activate, and then the next turn you move. That might be some interesting counterplay towards Shadow King or preemptive Shadow King in like play around. Scream. Lasher is a low cost card, so it means he's most susceptible to being moved by your opponent's move disruption cards. That includes Polaris even, and Scream is going to be able to nibble away at Lasher's power. In fact, can you imagine if they play, like it's late in the game or something, and they play a Scream, like turn 5, they play Scream and Polaris on the turn that you activate Lasher, you've just buffed them, probably. Crazy. Luke Cage, obviously, it's going to prevent the affliction. You should still... Well, no, yeah, it just prevents the affliction, doesn't it? So yeah, but basically takes away all the benefit of Lasher. Red Guardian, of course, we've spoken about. He's going to nullify Lasher. And one that might be applicable is Lady Deathstrike. Lady Deathstrike kills all cards here with 3 or less power. That might include Lasher if you haven't buffed Lasher beyond that. And if you're holding out Lasher to the end of the game to utilise the activate the most. So yeah, Lady Deathstrike could be a particularly devastating one on turn 5, so just be wary of that, specifically on that turn. I mean, and turn 6, of course, but... So yeah, think about priority if it's turn 6, etc, etc. Right, now let's talk about the synergies. You'll see a minor change to my normal setup with these next few slides. I've made a few, I think, improvements. Hopefully you appreciate them. If you are a long-time viewer, please let me know in the comments if you prefer this change. I've split out synergies from the decks, and I've also added some extra context to the decks. Anyway, synergies includes Agony. How about this? Haven't brought this up yet, but this is a 1-2. So this is on curve. Agony on 1, Lasher on 2 is absolutely awesome because Lasher comes out as a 4 power card, and you can then hammer down that affliction, which is super awesome. So we like that. Forge, of course, a nice, very simple and straightforward way to play into Lasher with a +2. Penny Parker's very interesting because, as we said, she's actually very, very good because you're going to get the +3 power of merging into Lasher, and then you're going to be able to move it, so you have more agency on turn probably 4, this might be, or 5, or 6, you know, whenever you do it, but you've got more agency against which card you want to afflict, so that's really cool. Galacta we've spoken about, going to be absolutely awesome. Galacta in general is just fantastic. Also, I really like playing Galacta alongside Gwenpool. It gives a bit more consistency to the things you want to buff, and I've been playing an outrageously good deck this month. It's a bit of an evolution on my Savage Spider deck, if you remember me mentioning that within the last couple of weeks. It's got Scarlet Spider, and it's an evolution of that with Galacta, Mr. Sinister, like I discussed earlier. It's just absolutely cracked in it. It has got Brood, it's got Shaw, loads of buffs. It's an extremely fun deck, so we will look at that very shortly. And Namora, like I say, the +5, going to be really nice if you want to risk playing Lasher alone at a location, considering the prevalence of Red Guardian. But let's look at the first couple of decks I've got for you. I've got a third deck on another slide if you want to skip forward to it. Anyway, this first deck is Venomous Strike. You'll also see one of the improvements I've made to these videos is discussing the cost of decks. I think it's really important to start including more budget decks in these videos. So premium decks, I think I'm going to say premium decks is anything with maybe like 5 or 6 Series 5 cards. Maybe I might go a little bit higher and call it like Premium Plus or something. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. I've only got 3 levels of cost right now. Anyway, Venomous Strike is a classic affliction deck. We've got Ajax in here. We've got the recent card release of Malekith to ensure you get as much value out of your deck as possible, because each individual piece from this deck would be so good to get from Malekith, apart from really just Scorpion and Nico. Those are probably the 2 that are a little bit weaker with Malekith. Malekith. Keith from accounts. And then, yeah, apart from that, it's a pretty classic Ajax deck if you're familiar, albeit we have also got Spider-Woman, which might be a bit of a sketchy one. But we've got Luke Cage in here ourselves, so we can't get afflicted by our spicy cards like US Agent. You know, US Agent could potentially get pulled from Malekith, which would be bad without the Luke Cage. We've also got Man-Thing, try and target those cards even more. If you have got Luke Cage out, and you're planning to play Man-Thing, you can put the Man-Thing on the Lasher location, and they're getting like super negated. No cards to really buff Lasher apart from Nico in here, so this is more just feeding into the cards which benefit from the affliction, like Ajax, and perhaps maybe like other that's actually, you know, Ajax is really the only one who directly benefits from the negative affliction here, but yeah, it hasn't got anything like a cheapened abomination like our next deck has. This is Poison Evo. This is a high evolutionary deck. I actually think this is more of a budget deck, because whilst it has got a couple of Series 6 cards in, actually they're like very much replaceable. The only Series 6 cards in here are Bruce Banner and Frigga. Frigga, I think, works really nicely with High Evolutionary and specifically this style of deck, because you've got a couple of really interesting targets. You could have an interesting target of literally just Wasp. That could be a really interesting play with Frigga if you just want to eke out a few more extra afflictions, especially if you don't have long to do that towards the end of the game and you want to bring your abomination down in value. That could be like an emergency play. So maybe something like a Sunspot into a Skip into a Frigga could be interesting. Even Bruce Banner and Lasher themselves, both cheap and potentially very strong cards, so those could be really good with Frigga. But that being said, potential replacements for Bruce Banner and Frigga could be some normal standard cohorts that you'd expect to see in High Evolutionary. You could even go down the Moon Girl route, maybe Moon Girl for Frigga and maybe Misty Knight for Bruce Banner. You're going to be floating energy with this deck. That is the whole point of it. So we've also got cards like She-Hulk in here. We've got the classic Hulk in here, which is going to be evolved by High Evolutionary. And we've got Cyclops and whatnot, and because we've got quite a lot of affliction in here, you know, we've got Wasp, we've got Lasher, we've got Cyclops, we've got Thing as well, we've also got Abomination. So again, more food for thought for the Moon Girl side of things if you don't have Frigga. But yeah, this seems like a pretty cool deck. Moving on to our third and final deck. This is the one. This is the one, guys. If you're going to do any, I would say do this. This is a premium deck. There are probably some changes you can make, but the more changes you make, the less it strays. Let's talk about it. It's called Savage Symbiotes. Like I said, it's a premium deck. This does have a number of Series 5 cards. It is like a buff and merger style deck with this added element of affliction, just via Lasher really. It's mainly a buff and merger deck. So we've got Agony. The cards that buff cards. We've got Agony, we've got America, we've got Penny Parker, we've got Ironheart, and we've got Galacta, Gwenpool, and Namora. So your potential ceiling with this deck is absolutely massive. Consider buffing your cards. I mean, you could stick Fastos in here, but it just makes it even more of an expensive deck. Although he is he dropping? I think he is dropping in Series Drop, and he's also, I think is he not coming soon to Spotlight Caches? I might be wrong on that actually. Correct me in the comments below. But yeah, so you've got lots of cards to buff cards, especially like the stuff in your hand like Gwenpool I really like playing out. Your cards that benefit so greatly from being buffed include Lasher, Mr. Sinister, Brood, Sebastian Shaw and Scarlet Spider. Those are your key buff targets. But you've got so many cards here that buff other cards. And with the Nomura play, you generally speaking, you do want to keep a location, or 2 locations obviously, with 1 card in. That's the only thing that makes this deck a bit tricky. You could actually just skip the Nomura, swap it for an Iron Man or something like that. It makes the deck a bit cheaper, and it also makes it a bit easier to play as well. Anyway, so you're playing out all of your buff cards, and you're accruing all of this stuff in your hand. And then really from turn 4/5 onwards, that's when you want to start dropping the things that you want buffed. Particularly Scarlet Spider from then, because of course you need Scarlet Spider out before the final turn so that you can activate him. But then the other fantastic part of this deck is the surprise factor on the final turn, and Lasher feeds into that really nicely. On your final turn you have the Lasher activating, so you're getting the extra 2, or it's going to be more than 2 on that location, and then you're dropping maybe a Sinister, which let's say it's been hit by Gwenpool once, so it's actually a 2/4. You play that out on maybe a Galacta or something if you've had a chance to play both of those by turn 6. You're playing out like a 2/14 Mr. Sinister. Oh, and you've still got 4 energy left. Fine. So you might be playing out a Sebastian Shaw, who's now up to like a 3/8 very easily. Or you even just, maybe your Brood got tagged once by Gwenpool. Oh, it's a 3/12. The surprise factor with this deck is incredible. If you want to bring it down in cost, you can do so. Like I say, maybe Nomura for Iron Man, maybe Penny Parker for anything, any good 2-drop, basically. And you've already brought the cost down significantly. Yeah, I have had so much fun playing a similar style of deck to this, so I really would recommend that. You also see little advert on the screen here. Please like, subscribe and turn notifications on. All of these things really help my channel. So if you nar, let's go to Narnia. We're going to see Aslan the Lion. There's been like some weird sort of Irish stuff this video. It's making everyone very uncomfortable. Anyway, yeah, please, if you're new, subscribe if you can bear this madness. Honestly, this is quite a restrained episode as well, by the way. Like, it's like 7:45 a.m. and yeah, obviously I did look at my wrist, but actually I looked at my computer because like misdirection in it. Anyway, MJ, you're spiraling, you're crashing out of control. No, Mayday. Star ratings. Overall, I think that Lasher is a 4-star card. I think he's really good. I think he's got tons of potential. He's obviously he's a Series 4 card, so he's also like, you know, achievably buyable if you even miss out on high voltage, but he's available through high voltage. And he's good. He's a good card. I think he's probably better than Agony, even though I'm a big Agony fan anyway, as you all have just seen. From a fun perspective, I think it will be quite fun activating him. I don't think I've seen his effect yet, actually, unless I missed it from... It probably was in the developer update video, but I forget things instantly after seeing them. But I think it will be fun activating him. I think activate cards in general just have an added element of endorphins to them, so they're just inherently fun to play. Within his archetypes that he's going to fit into, I think he'll be a really good feeling component of them, so I've given him 4 stars there as well. And from a competitive standpoint, yeah, I think generally speaking he's a 2/4. So I think he's just good and competitive, but you're going to be angling towards those buffs for him. So I think he's going to do well there as well. This is actually the first time that I remember that I've given the same score for every single indicator thing, every single thing. Anyway, so ultimately, is Lasher a snap or pass? Guys, he's available through high voltage. This is not a hard card to get. It's not a difficult game mode. It's a very fun game mode. I think generally the community reception to high voltage last time was really positive. It's not hard. You just play the missions. You get high voltage points or whatever they are just through playing the game, but then every day like the missions refresh, so it's literally just easy to even get. You just need to play the game a fair bit and it's easy to get, so there's no reason not to if you like high voltage. So thank you very much. Oh, and if you, like I said earlier, if you know he comes to the game as a Series 4 card and he's available to buy in the token stock from January 4. Token shop from January 4. It's devolved into chaos, the end of this video. I'm going to stop talking because if I talk anymore, it's just going to get worse. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of Lasher in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.